Module 6.2, Adjectives, describing nouns. Now, we've already talked in 6.1 about relatives, and if you haven't yet looked at the section on relatives, please do that first before you look at adjectives. Adjectives and relatives have exactly the same function. They both describe nouns. They get constructed in very similar ways, but there's some small varieties around which concords are used. At this point in time, it doesn't matter whether you confuse adjectives and relatives and then concords, as long as you understand their function and how the concords are created. Now, there are only 18 adjective stems in the whole of Xhosa, and only a few of them are commonly used, and they include numbers 1 to 6, and then there are only 12 others that you can slowly become familiar with. As you can see from the table here, on the left we have our numbers from 1 to 6. And this is when we are using our numbers to describe something. If you want 1 spoon of sugar, 2 spoon of sugar, 3 spoon of sugar, etc. So our adjectival stem for 1 is nye. Our adjectival stem for 2, bini. Our adjectival stem for 3, tatu. Our adjectival stem for 4, ne. Our adjectival stem for 5, hlanu. And for 6, tandatu. And very important to learn these and know them well. And then there's a few very common adjectives that get used. So the stems here again, hle for beautiful, bi for bad or ugly, cha for young or fresh, and quite often it's used in Xhosa when somebody would look at you and say, oh, you're looking fresh today, which means you're looking happy and unburdened. Dala, which is for old or stale, kulu, which means big or large, and ncinci, which is the stem for small. Now again, as with relatives, there's something called an adjectival concord, and what is very confusing is that there's a slightly different set of concords for adjectives than there are for the relative stems, which makes it, I must say, unnecessarily complicated. I've mentioned earlier strong versus weak noun classes. You don't need to understand this, but again, just take note of it. But in what we traditionally call the strong noun classes, the adjectival concord and the relative concord are formed in exactly the same way. So remember, with our relative concord, we take the noun prefix of our noun. In the case of class 7, which is a strong class, isi relates to that isikolo. We add a to the front of it. The two vowels together form an e, and you have your isi that will be added to the front of your adjectival stem. So kulu means big, isi is the adjectival concord related to isikolo. So if you want to say the big school or the school that is big, isikolo, isikulu. But with our weak noun classes, they are formed slightly differently. So there is again an a at the front plus that noun prefix, but they add in an n or an m, and why this happens is not entirely clear. Differentiating when to use the n or when to use the m is something that you slowly learn through the sound of the language, although there are rules that one could apply if one was so inclined. But let's just look at a couple of examples. So class 9 is what is considered a weak noun class, and you will see that the noun prefix is literally made up only of a vowel, and that's what makes it a weak class. So to create the adjectival concord, in this case, a is added to that I, but they also add in an n or an m. So the adjectival concord for class 9 is either n or m. So again, if we have big, or our adjectival stem is kulu, then that n is the adjectival concord related to the class 9 noun into enkulu, the big thing. Our next example is a class 10 noun, iteaspooni, which means teaspoons. Again, to form your adjectival concord of what is going to be describing your teaspoons would be the a plus easy, which is your noun prefix for that particular class, and then N stroke M, depending again on the sound. So our adjectival concord will be ezin or ezim. So in this example, we're going to use beanie as our adjectival stem. Our adjectival concord in this case is ezim, again referring to the teaspoons, to our class 10 noun. So if I want to say 2 teaspoons, for example, of sugar, I teaspooni ezimbini. And that ezim will then be valid for any of the numbers. So if it's 3 teaspoons, it'll be ezimtatu, etc. And you can actually go through that list of adjectival stems and apply them, for examples, to I teaspooni to start getting the sound of that particular adjectival use. So here again is another scary table. Please don't get overwhelmed. Don't try and memorize these. It's just to give you an idea of how the different noun classes work and how our adjectives are structured. And you can see in this particular case, we're using the adjectival stem again of kulu, which means big. And you will notice that if you look at your classes like 5 and 7, 2, 8, etc., those ones that are not highlighted, and you were to compare them to your table with relative concords, you'll notice they're exactly the same. So they're actually very easy to remember and to figure out. The ones that are slightly different are the so-called weak noun classes, which is 1, 3, 9, 4, and 6. And then, strangely enough, 10 and 12 are sometimes treated like weak and sometimes like strong. In this example, they treat it like a weak noun class. Don't be overwhelmed by this. It's more about every time you learn a new adjective linked to a specific noun, you will start to notice that they all look slightly different. So if we want to say that, for example, we want to use the word big, we'll look again at class 1 and 2 there. Umtwana omkulu means the big child. That is the adjectival concord related to umtwana. But abantwana, abakulu, different adjectival concord related to that particular noun class. Another example, which is kind of interesting to notice the variety, is that a strong noun class is class 8, and you will notice there that our adjectival concord is again formed by a plus izzy, and therefore the adjectival concord is ezi. So if you say, I've got big friends or huge friends, izihlobo ezikulu, those are my major or important friends. But if we look at class 10, which interestingly enough also has izzy as its noun prefix, but now this is considered a weaker class because some of our nouns have that double E in front of it. Now suddenly they add in that N or that M, and so now it's itoliki ezinkulu, and you find that an N has been added in there. Don't memorize, just play around with these. Again, take another adjectival stem and go through each of your nouns and just notice how the adjectival concord changes depending on the noun class that it is describing. Please don't give up on Xhosa after these 2 modules. At the moment, just memorize, for example, 2 teaspoons, sweet things, all these common adjectives that we might use. And slowly over time, your ear will start to tune in of how the different concords relate to the different nouns.